welcome back everyone to Master Game Design, Unreal Engine 5 Stylized Environment and Third Person Blueprint course. In the last lesson we left ourselves off by importing all of these assets into our current scene, and now we're going to make use out of them. But actually, before doing that, I'd rather have us fix up a little bit of this sky, a little bit of this environment, although it is a nice environment by default. For this particular scene where it has more of an exotic type of a look, I don't think it'll work quite as well for us. So first things first, let's go ahead and grab ourselves an interesting skybox. So within a resource pack, you'll find yourself a simple skybox with clouds. And before just straight away importing it, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. This file is, as you can see, quite large. It is 32 megabytes. For a simple texture, it is quite big. The reason being is that for starters, the quality of this image is quite a big one. And secondly, in order to make the overall skyboxes work properly, you need to have a bit of a less compression on your image. So .exr or the other format, which could be .hdri, has ability to save your images within a 32-bit type of format, where alternatively for most of the images it would be either 8-bit or 16-bit. So this is what's causing the image to be so large, and usually that's a good thing. So yeah, we're going to make use out of that. We're going to go on to the landscape, and actually I will just add it over here. This is getting a little bit messy overall, but it's okay because yeah, we're just going to leave it as is. Actually, let's go ahead and keep it as this for now. We can always go ahead and clean it up later. And all I'm doing right now is just simply, actually I'll just show you the folder. All I'm doing right now is just simply dragging and dropping it over here like so, and it should give us a nice skybox texture. So this is what we're getting basically. As you can see, the image is 8K, 8000 by 4000 pixels, so it's quite a large one. And yeah, the skybox image doesn't need to necessarily have a square. It really depends on what you're trying to get. Yeah, we're just going to make use out of it in a simple manner. So for us to do that, we're going to, for starters, make sure that we set it up properly with the skybox. And I will actually create a new folder for the skybox so we could have everything in one folder. So we'll grab this over here and just drag it within the left hand section. I opened up the landscape folder and just moving it to the skybox. There you go. Now we have an empty skybox with texture. So to create a material, it's actually going to be rather simple. We'll just need to create a material from scratch. But for us to do that, we just need to right click on a material, and we can call this m_skybox like so. And yeah, by double clicking on it, we'll open this up. And before we really get into this, I'd rather play a quick material introduction video just to be able to catch up with everyone in regards to the pacing. So yeah, I'll go ahead and play that now. So I'll see you in a bit. Hey everyone, welcome to the basics video for Unreal Engine, in which we're going to cover the basics of materials. So for starters, in order to create ourselves a basic material, I'm going to right click within the content browser, and I'm going to select material like so. By doing that, we're able to create ourselves a material, and we can at the same time rename the material. So I'm just going to call this material like so. I'm going to click enter, and then I'm just going to double click on it in order to open ourselves up with a material graph. So this is the thing that we're going to spend most of the time tweaking and adjusting the material, which will be then applied onto our assets. To maximize the window itself, I'm going to go ahead and click on this button over here like so, which will expand this entire window and make it a little bit more clear on what kind of content it has. Most of the screen is covered with a material graph, which will allow us to add nodes onto it. If we were to click and hold right click, we're able to pan or view around within it. If we were to use our mouse wheel, we can zoom in and out. And finally, we can make use out of it to click and tap on a node using our left mouse button. Currently, we only have one node. This is the one where we connect basically all of the information for a material. It will contain all the necessary inputs for a material. If I were to zoom in, we can see that we have base color, metallic, specular, roughness, and so on. Some of the material inputs are not highlighted in the same way as the other. And the reason being is that based on the type of material setting that we're using, we're going to be able to have different options for it. So by default, for example, we're not able to use opacity. We can change that through its properties tab. Speaking of properties, if we look at the bottom left-hand corner of the window, we can see that we have Details tab. The Details tab will show us all the options of a node based on the selection that we have. So currently we have the material result node selected, and this will allow us to see all of its properties. So for example, I'm not going to go too much into it as it has quite a lot of advanced options. But for example, if we were to scroll down using this bar over here, we can see a lot more options. And I'm just looking right now for something called blend mode. If we were to change this from opaque to masked, for example, we can see that the opacity mask gets enabled, allowing us to make use out of it along the other material inputs. So I'm just going to real quick go back from mask to opaque, like so, and continue on with the overview of the material graph. On the top left-hand corner, what we have is we have a preview of the material itself. Right now, it's currently set as a ball, and if we were to hold left mouse button and move around, we can see it rotating. So by using our left mouse button, we can just rotate it around. We can use our mouse wheel to zoom in and out like so. And we can use our middle mouse button to pan around this type of camera as well. So it's a little bit different in comparison to material graph controls, where the right mouse button is the one that pans around. In this one, using middle mouse button allows you to pan around like so. Then we also have a couple of useful options on the bottom right hand corner, which allows us to change between assets like so. We have a cylinder, we have a sphere, we have a simple plane, cube, as well as we can also set ourselves up with a custom type of a mesh, which we currently don't have. So I'm just going to click continue as is and move on. I'm going to go back onto the sphere. And also we have options for the types similar that we could see within our game viewport, which is we can change the lit mode to be unlit, for example, to see only the base color. We can also change the show to allow us to see grid, for example, or to disable the background completely to not get us distracted while working on our material. Then we also have perspective, which will allow us to change the camera view. And we also have viewport options, which again is similar to what you would see within the viewport itself. It allows us to keep it real time, to change the field of view, and options like these. Again, I'm going to leave them as is. 99% of the time, you're not going to be touching them, as the default viewport will allow us to see the material we're working on just fine. Now we also have a toolbar unique to the material graph, which are located at the top section. We have apply, which will allow us to apply all the settings directly onto the material and update our mesh that we have applied that material onto. We also have search, which would allow us to search the node for the specific type of an item. Clicking home will allow us to get back onto our result node. We then have a hierarchy, which would allow us to work with more complex type of shaders. We also have live update, which would allow us to get real-time update for our game view. And the one that we'd like to remember the most probably out of this entire bar is going to be clean graph. If we have a big mess in our material and some of them aren't, some of the nodes wouldn't be even used. By clicking on clean graph, you'd be deleting them, but just make sure to make use out of that when you know that the material that you created doesn't have the nodes, unused nodes that you're planning to use later on. Preview state, hide unrelated, stats, and platform stats all help with a more in-depth information for when you're creating material, but we're not going to be using them much often, so let's not get into that too much. And speaking of stats, we do have stats at the bottom bar by default. It will show you all the necessary information, such as the amount of shader samples that is being used and the shader count. So we'd be able to tell how heavy it is on performance. All right, so going back to the material input node, based on the type of input we're placing into these values, we'll get different type of results. And the ones that we can have options, the basic ones is if we were to right click, we can search for all of the nodes that we can add onto our material graph. And I'm just going to search for constant. We can see that we have constant, constant 2 vector, constant 3 vector, and constant 4 vector. We're going to talk about that in a second. For now though, I'm just going to select constant like so. And we can see that we get this sort of a option, which essentially will allow us to change the value of our nodes. If we were to directly plug this into the base color, we can see the direct results of the material. It takes a bit to load up, but we can see that by default, the value 0, 0 will give us a black type of a color. However, if we were to change this value to a 1 by clicking on this type of a value over here, or alternatively, if we were to select this node, we can see that the details tab has now changed. We can change the value over here. If I were to click on this one and change this to a value of 1, like so, we can see that the base color has now changed to be a completely white material. One thing to worth knowing is that everything on a node, when it's going to be on the right hand side, it's always going to be an output. And when it's on the left hand side, it's going to be an input. So right now, this is an output. I'm able to click and hold left mouse button and connect it to a base color. Or for example, I can connect this to a roughness value, which will make this completely rough and no glossiness would be applied onto this material, making the material look quite flat in this occasion. Whilst working with these nodes, you need to consider that also in order to move them out of the way, you can click and hold Control, and holding left mouse button, you can just tap and drag it out like so. Tap on the screen and then release it, and that way we're able to remove the float value completely from the node graph. And one more thing to also consider, you can make use out of it in order to switch up the values. So for example, if I were to connect both of these to the roughness value and the base color, and I want them to be onto another value, what I can do is I can click and hold 1, tap on the screen, get myself a new value, and now while holding Control, I can tap on this, and now both of these connectors are going to be reconnected when I release my left mouse button. So now I can see that they go from 1 to 0, and it turns my base color to a value of 0 and roughness to a value of 0, which in turn makes this quite a shiny type of an object. Now going back to the vectors, if I were to delete this one, for example, if we want to get ourselves a different type of a color, what we can do is when we hold 1 and tap on a graph, we can create ourselves a constant 1. And when we hold 2 on a graph and tap on a screen, we can create ourselves constant vector 2. Then finally, we can click and hold 3 and tap on a graph and create ourselves a constant vector 3. What this will mean is that it'll attach 2 values at once onto constant vector 2 and 3 values at once onto constant vector 3. However, if we look at the outputs that it gives, it's giving us 3 different outputs within this graph. What this will mean basically is that one output will combine them both, while the other one is going to give us a value for x, and the third one is going to give us a value for y. The same applies to a constant 3. Whereas the first one is going to be a combination of those 3. The second one is going to be red, which is going to be a value of x. Then the third one is going to be green, a value of y. And finally, z is going to be a last one, the value of the blue output over here. By the way, in order to move the graphs, if we were to click and hold on the top section, we can just simply move them around like so. And now what's interesting about X, Y, and Z is that each one of them have the color value assigned to them. So as I said before, X is going to be red. It's always going to be red in a Unreal Engine software. And what this will do is it's also based on the 3D space. So for example, if we look at this bottom left-hand corner of our preview sphere, we can see that the Z is going to be going up, and XY is going to be going forwards and sideways like so. So these values not only help you to get more additional information, it also represents the three-dimensional space. And not only that, if I were to change the X value, for example, from 0 to 1, we can see that the entire color changes to red. We can see this within the preview bar over here. And if I were to connect all of these values like so onto our base color, we can see that it changes the entire material to be red. So what's nice about it is that by just simply combining these values, we can simply get ourselves a complete different value to our material. So by changing this to a 0.5 and, for example, changing the Y value to a 0.5 as well, we can see that we get this sort of a result. I will change these two to 1, for example, to get it brighter. And yeah, by changing them to a higher value, we can see that it gives us a brighter type of a color as well. And yeah, by having these X and Y values present, both of them at once, we can see that it combines them and changes the color completely. So we can make use out of these float values to actually get a custom color out of our material. We can also make changes out of this using a color picker by clicking on this constant option over here. First of all, let's go ahead and make sure we select the float, the node value, and now we can click on this box over here. We can see that we get ourselves a color picker, and essentially, yeah, we can change the color to any one we want. So for example, I want a blue color or a pink one. We can click OK, and we're going to get ourselves a pink type of a material. So now that we're done with it, I'm going to click clean graph like so to clean up my unused nodes. I'm then going to click on the top left hand corner, click apply to make sure that my material shader is being applied. And if I were to close this graph, we can see that material has been made. Basically, we can create ourselves a shape. Let's go ahead and create a sphere within our world. I'm going to just simply click and hold and then drag it onto this object like so and get this sort of a result. So yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to the material setup. That's all it takes in order to set ourselves up with a material. I hope that the video has been helpful and thank you for watching. Alright, I hope that the video was informative and you were able to pick a couple of things in regards to the overall material graph. So now we're going to make use out of it in order to set ourselves up with the Skybox. So we're going to do that in the next lesson. Thank you so much for watching and I'll be seeing you.